Greetings, this is Polyarp. It's a Max for Live MIDI effect that acts as an arpeggiator-style polyrhythm generator. And like an arpeggiator, the basic idea is that you can hold some notes and you'll hear those notes repeated in a pattern. In this case, the pattern is a polyrhythm where each note is repeating at some multiple of a bass pulse, and that bass pulse is set here. It can be set in terms of cycles per second from 0 to 1, and there's a multiplier, which can also be negative. Or it can be set in terms of your project's tempo. So quarter notes, measures, up to 1 note per 32 measures, which is pretty slow. Let's go down to once per measure. The multiplier works here as well. These ratios that you see here are the multipliers for all of the voices that are being held. And by default, you get this linear series from 1 to 16. But you can change that if you want by changing these ratios. So I could make this first voice repeat 2 times the bass pulse. And the next one I could make 3/2, which is 1.5 times the bass pulse. 4/3 would be like 1.33 times the bass pulse. 5/4 would be 1.25 the bass pulse. Let's try quarter notes for that one. And you can go back to the default ratios by clicking this defaults button. Retrig, when that's turned on, is going to make each note reset its repetition cycle when a new note is played. So you always hear the note immediately when you have it running that way. You can also reset all of the notes at once with this reset button. If retrig is turned off, this polyrhythm is going to continuously run, and it doesn't care when new notes are pressed or released. So you might not hear the note right away, but the polyrhythm is always sort of intact. That rhythmic shape doesn't change. Drift will add some randomness to the timing of the voices, and duration is the duration of the notes we generate. Down here are up to 8 different triggers that can be engaged for all of the voices. And when these notes cross those thresholds, they will play a new note. And you can change where exactly those triggers occur by changing the percentage you see here. So that's roughly 1/3 of the way through the cycle. And that can be interesting, especially because some of these ratios can be set to negative numbers. So for example, if I had 2/1, 3/2, 4/3, and this fourth note was -2/1, this is going to be double the bass pulse, just like the first note, but this one will move backwards. Let's play 4 notes. So you can see that yellow note is moving in the opposite direction. And if the only trigger is at 0%, that kind of doesn't mean anything. But if you have a trigger anywhere else, it's going to create a different pattern for notes that are moving backwards versus notes moving forwards. Because the notes moving forward are going to cross this trigger at 1/3 of the way through their cycle, but a note moving backwards is going to cross it at -1/3, which is +2/3. So even though this fourth note is repeating at the same rate as the first note, it's happening at a different point within its cycle. And there are some presets included with Polyarp that demonstrate that in some interesting ways, like this preset. So there's only one trigger here, which is at 25%, but some of these voices are moving backwards, and for them that's like -25%. Okay, let me go back to default settings, and I'll put one trigger at 0% here. And let's realign these voices. We've looked at how you can sort of manually create these different polyrhythms by specifying different ratios for each voice. You can also change the starting position of each voice with these percentage boxes to make them start at a different point in their repetition cycle. These boxes up here allow you to globally change all of the ratios by either multiplying the numerator and the denominator or offsetting the numerator and the denominator. And this toggle needs to be on for that to work. So for example, if I start with my basic harmonic series, and then I add 9 to all of the denominators, the ratios are now 1/10, 2/10, etc. So a lot slower. Now I'm going to add 79 to the numerators. And that creates this really interesting effect because the first voice is repeating at 80/10, which is 8 times the bass pulse. But the second voice is 81/10, so 8.1 times the bass pulse, 8.2, 8.3, etc. Each voice is just slightly faster than the previous voice. So you get this really slowly changing rhythmic pattern. Let's go back to the default and try multiplying. I'll multiply the denominators by 10 and then the numerators by 10. And that's actually the same as the basic harmonic series, but I could from there subtract 80 from all the numerators, and that makes my first 8 voices negative, while the next 8 voices are positive. So you get some pretty cool effects like that. Okay, so that's Polyarp, folks.